Okay, we are going to review what's new since Project Cost version 16.2.1. One of the first things I'd like to show you is we now are able to tag cash receipts to projects and tasks and track those in our inquiry window and actually see the cash that's been received on our project. The other thing that we can allow for is multiple funding sources for a single project. So most of the time one customer owns a single project, but there are times where multiple funding sources contribute toward one single project, and we're able to take cash payments from multiple customers and tag them to a single project. Let me show you how this works. So under Setup, we go to System Setup, and with a check mark, we're going to turn on this Enable Cash Receipt Processing. So I have to have it turned on for us to be able to use it there. Okay, I'm going to save that. And now we had put in a sales transaction, tagged it to a customer and a project and task, just like we normally would, and sent it out the door. Now, when our customer sends in payment to us, they're going to indicate what invoice they're paying. And we're going to go down here to Transactions, Cash Receipts, and pull up, we're going to create a receipt here. Just grab the next sequential number, look up the customer, and put in the amount. And then we're going to see when we click on Apply that because our sales transaction was already tagged, the sales transaction PCSOP 7 was already tagged to our project and task. When I indicate here with a check mark that that's the document they're paying, I'm going to actually be able to pull down additional and PC transaction entry. And I can see that it's this project diesel and it's this task professional services that is getting the cost and now getting the revenue associated with this payment. So let's go look at our project model inquiry window and see how that shows up in our inquiry window. But it's a very simple process now to be able to look at the project and task on the cash receipt. It has to be on the sales invoice that we are paying. That's the dependency there. Okay, so I'm going to save that. And now I'm going to go over to my project model inquiry window, and I'm going to pull up my diesel project here. And you'll see here that I've got cash received of $400. That is the very payment that I just tagged. And so we had some invoices out there. Someone's made a payment, and I'm looking at the cash that's been received against those outstanding invoices. All right. So if you haven't been doing it already, I really encourage you to get used to thinking about inquiring on your projects from the project model inquiry window, because it's in this window that you get a snapshot of the performance of your project and that you can drill down into any of these blue hyperlinks to get the detail about any of these transactions. So there's a revenue hyperlink, labor, subcontract purchases, and material. And then there's also a PO commitments hyperlink here. So if I wanted to look at what this $160 worth of AP expenses sitting on a purchase order are, I can click on commitments here and I can see that it's these transactions. Okay, and you can furthermore drill in by highlighting one of those and drilling into the other hyperlink here, PO number, to actually see the genesis of that purchase order. Okay, so that's the first thing. We have cash receipts now. The other thing that we have inside Project Cost is the ability to work with requisitions. So GP has a requisition window out of the box, and Project Cost now works with that window. So if I go to Purchasing Transactions, Purchase Requisitions, and I pull up a requisition here, when I get to the extended cost field of that line that I've entered for the requisition, that is when Project Cost window will pop up. And that is when I would tag a project and a task for this expense. So there's $100 total expense here. sitting in this requisition. I'm tagging it to a project and task, and I'm just hitting save. Now, what I highly recommend is to get the most bang for your buck here with requisition management. It's that you actually turn on the GP workflow piece, because then when you submit the requisition, it converts to a PO. And then with workflow, you can see the entire approval process as it unfolds in the purchase order. And you can see when it actually is finally approved and the vendor receives the purchase order. You can also track when the goods are received and when the three-way match happens with vendor's invoice. So I highly recommend GP's workflow if you're going to use requisitions. But the main point here is just to show you that project cost will work with requisitions. Now you'll notice that this window only allows for one line entry, and so I would go to my next window to get another clear line to put in my second line if I had other widgets that I wanted to order. Okay. All right, the third item that I'd like to show you is we have a new reporting tool inside Project Cost. It's called Devexpress. It's both an authoring tool and a publishing tool. And you'll see it here under reports in our newer versions. It's these first three buttons. It consists of these first three buttons. So I wanted to show you that from the project model inquiry window that we were just in a second ago, if I wanted to look up my diesel project, and let's say I need a report printed of this information, I can click on this little orange and brown icon, and that is Devexpress. Okay, but you have to be logged in as any other user than SA to make this publishing tool work. Okay, so I just got this error message that said GP user is not assigned to any project cost user, and that's because SA is not really supposed to be assigned to use this tool. It has to actually be a accounting user, if you will, of GP that is now going to run these reports. And that's really just to protect the security of the SA system admin user account. Okay, so I'm going to log in then as Adam Barr, and I'm going to show you how our new tool works. Okay, so if I go back to that project model inquiry window and I pull back up the diesel project, here it is, and I want to mash on this Devexpress shortcut button. It asks me, do I want to print a report for just this one project that I'm on or all projects? So I'm going to click one project, and I'm going to let it pull back that report. The first time you generate the reports, it does take longer than normal, but then thereafter, they generate pretty quickly. Okay, the window will finally pull up, and then you're able to put in a from and to date and choose your project. So I'm going to choose the diesel project. And I could indicate if we've got indirect allocations or overhead allocations in this case, we could actually, pull that information in as well. And we can also pull in a particular budget if we wanted to. So I'm just going to choose, the date from the beginning of the year to today and submit. This will basically generate a profit and loss statement for the project. And it kind of lays out like this. Now, what I think is the best tool or the best piece of this tool is that we're able then to go up here to where this little piece of paper and arrow icon are, and we can export that out to any of these formats. So getting it out to Excel is very easy, for instance. So here's the report in Excel. Okay, and then I could, of course, email it to wherever I need to, etc. and get that information to whomever I need it to go to. All right, so that's an example of one report here in Devexpress, and I just gave you probably the most used option, which is just launching it from inside our project model tool and getting the profit and loss statement basically for that one project. Okay, but there's some other things we can do with that tool that I want to show you. So if we go to the report section of project cost and we go to report manager, this is where we have a list of all the out-of-the-box reports that we get with project cost. Now, one of them here, like for instance, this chart of accounts report, for instance, if I want to, I could just click on that and run the report. Okay, it's as easy as that to kind of get the report to generate. And if I want all accounts of my chart of accounts or just some accounts to be in that view, I'll choose those. But I'm just going to say all accounts and hit submit. And now it's going to pull back my entire GL account, listing, if you will. Okay, so that's just an example of how you would use a report and generate it. Another report, like if you do federal contracting and you need a 1034 to print, you can actually check mark that particular report option and hit run report. And the format for a 1034 is already in here. And you can choose the date and submit. And you'll notice that the 1034 format is already here. And it would populate with any data that you have on this project, such as, direct labor charges and consultant invoice charges, etc. So our report layout follows exactly the 1034 format. And all of this documentation would be filled in with all the data from that one project. Okay, but there's another thing that you can do here inside the Devexpress that I want to show you, and that is our second button here called Report Button Setup. So let's say that we've got users that actually don't get into GP. They can only get to the portal to put their time in and their expenses. But I really need to give them a mechanism to pull a report so that they can actually look at some data, some specific data. Or we have maybe an example of where somebody's only allowed to be in the financial module of GP, and they can't see project costs. They can't get into project cost run reports there. So that's an example of when I would deploy that COA report that we first generated. Let me show you. I will create a report button called COA report here. I'm going to call the button COA report, and I'm going to choose a dictionary from all that are available, which is GP or project cost or any of the other what look like third-party add-ons here inside of GP. It's really mostly just GP, or is it project cost? That's usually the two that people are choosing from. So I chose GP, and then I said, what technical name of the form in GP am I going to put this button on so that the person can actually generate it from the financial subledger? And I chose GL transaction entry from the financial windows. So I chose my financial subledger and I chose the window that I want my button to be connected to. Okay, so I chose GL transaction entry here. I gave the report name. I basically created a COA report, and now I'm coming back and selecting that, saying, okay, my report button's going to be called COA report, and my report name is called COA report. That's very typical for those two things to be the same. And then in the menu, when the person looks to find the report, they're going to see it called COA report. I can then give security to everyone or to just certain users. In this case, I'm going to give it to certain users so that way I can show you the security layer. Okay, so that's everything about creating a report button and mapping it to a report name and having it where it will display in a particular GP window. Okay, so now let me go to the next step and show you that there's a security layer, which we handle here under report assignment. And this is where I go out and I find my report button, which I called it COA report. And I then choose who from everyone in our company is going to be able to access it. And so I wanted to be sure that Adam Barr had access to it because that's who I'm logged in as, and I want to be able to show it to you in a second. So I chose Adam Barr. I'm going to click close. Okay, so now I'm going to go over to the financial journal entry window, which is where I told the system that I want the button to be. And if I pull up a journal entry here and I go under additional, I can actually see that there's something called a COA report. And they can actually generate a report of our chart of accounts from this window now. Okay, because they have access to a report button that I created in that window that they didn't have access to before. Okay, so that's how we can deploy our reports to users that may not have security to these reports natively. And it's particularly helpful when we're talking about project reports that need to get deployed to the portal, or project reports that need to get deployed inside some other GP subledger because the person wanting to generate the report doesn't have access to project cost. Okay, lastly, I wanted to show you that we have another piece of functionality that's very helpful, and it makes our time and expense portal work very nicely now, and that is what's called advanced security. So the first step in turning on advanced security is to go to System Setup and make sure that you've enabled project and organization security with the check mark. And then what we're going to do is we're going to log out of GP, log back in, and under Setup, we're going to see this advanced security section. And if we expand that, we'll see that it has 4 palettes under that advanced security functionality. The first palette is a place where we go in and we put everybody's titles. We're just creating titles. And then when we, so, like right now we'll have a controller in here, and that's the name of the role. And then I'm going to go to their employee labor card, pull up employee setup, and I'm going to pull up whoever is the controller, and I'm going to go to employee roles and give them that role of controller. Okay, so that's how I map the role that I create to this employee. All right, so that's step 1. Step 2 is to create an organization. So here I can create an organization with multiple levels of departments. So I have the accounting department here. I want to create another one called, sales. Okay, and you just build out all of your departments of your company. And then you come into each department and you indicate which of your employees is in that department. And you just assign their user ID to that certain department. So if I want to add another one, I just click this plus sign next to the little man icon, and I go out and choose whoever else is in the accounting department. And I just get everybody into the departments they belong to in the entire organization. That's the objective of step 2, organization setup. Step 3, project security setup. This is actually where I'm coming into a project. I'm pulling up a particular either role, so I could say the controller themselves, and what can they do? At most, logged in as themselves in the portal, what are they able to do? Well, I right-clicked up here at the company level and right-clicked and said, this particular person, the controller, can approve everybody's time entries. So that's why approve is checkmarked here. Okay, but I could have just as easily said, maybe they can only come here to this one lowest level task, and they can only enter their time against that task. Or perhaps since I gave them approval up here at the highest level, maybe I'm saying, well, they can approve everything, but right here, this one era project, I don't want them to be able to do anything, so I'm going to deny them access to that entire project. But basically what you're trying to do is either by role or by specific user ID. So we would pull up this specific user. I indicate what this person can or cannot do in this hierarchy. And so it gives them the access to the security. So whatever I lock them down to be able to do, that's what they're going to be able to see and do inside the portal. So if I only said they can enter on 5 projects, they're only going to see that list of 5 projects when they go to put time in. Okay, this last palette is organizational security, and this is really where emulation can happen. So sometimes it's necessary that we allow a timekeeping admin to put time in on behalf of other folks. And so we can do that here either by role or by user. We would then right click here and indicate if we're just letting them emulate, or we're letting them report, or we're actually making them an approver. Okay, so those are the options here in this organization security setup window. All right, so now that we have all that in place, if I go out to the portal, then I can actually see this in action. Okay, so we log into the portal as Adam Barr. And, we come into the timekeeping month view here, and I can actually go put time in, and I can look at my projects that I've been limited to see. Okay, so our security would limit me to see certain projects here. And so that's one level. The other thing is I'm allowed to emulate. That's what this little hand-holding icon is. Everybody that I'm allowed to emulate is visible here. So I could impersonate Otis Carter and put time and expenses in for Otis Carter. And you'll notice that when I log in as that, it still tracks me as Adam Barr, but it shows that I'm emulating another employee. Okay. So another thing that I want to show you is Adam Barr, if he's acting as a supervisor, he can get to the approval portal, which is really just a pull down here at the top. And he goes to the approval portal and he's able to see transactions created by his subordinates. Okay, and he would see a whole list of those transactions here. Let's go put some transactions in so that we can see some. So I'm going to go into the time entry portal and I'm just going to start putting in some time. Like this, and I'll just backdate it to February. So we'll say 8 hours on the 17th. And once I have that in place, I can go back to the week view and I can actually just put in some more time for that one project and task. And the other projects and tasks that I've been working on the last 90 days are visible, so I can just very quickly get some time put in. Okay. Oops, not 800. Okay. And not 80. There we go. So I basically can come in very quickly and get my time entered here. Want to make sure that I don't have any more than 8 hours on any day. So there's that. Okay, so now if I go back and I look at the week of the 17th, I can see that I've got a straight 40 hours in for that week. And if you've got submissions turned on, which again is a particular parameter inside of project cost in our setup window, let me go show you that. Okay, so here inside system setup again in project cost, we're able to turn on submissions, and that's enable submission process here at the bottom with the check mark. And that will enable us when we're in the time and expense portal, we will see a submit button, which really just lets us accumulate all of our entries until we're ready for our approver to look at them. And we can then look at them one by one, make sure that they're exactly what we wanted them to be. If they look good, we're going to select them all and hit this submit button over here to the left. And those will now go to our approver. Well, Adam Barr is his own approver in this case, and I'm going to go to the approval portal as Adam Barr. I'm going to refresh, and he's going to see those transactions we just submitted, those 4 transactions. So here they are, and the approver is then going to be able to highlight them, look at the detail down here of what's involved in those transactions. This would take a 500-character billing description here. We're going to look to make sure everything looks the way we want it to, and it's ready to go over to accounting. We particularly check the hours and the project and task. And if they all look good, we're going to check mark them and we're going to hit the save button. And that enables it to go over to accounting now. Okay, so the approval is that easy. It's just in a separate window. It usually follows a submission. And I want to show you the last step here is now I'm wearing my accounting hat. I come into transactions over here on project costs, and I go to create, SOP, which is sales invoices. And I'm going to go use my reusable batch. And you'll see here that for Aaron Fitz, I've got this Atom bar time. That's what I just approved, are these 3 transactions. So they are now sitting here for accounting to work with. Accounting would then look at this, make sure it's the right GL account, the hours and quantity dollars look right, and then they're going to check mark those and hit process and send them over to a GP SOP batch. And that's the entire process there. So those are the new things that we have available to us since 16.2.1. Thank you.